Actually, a lot of you have been participating. Meredith, I'm looking at you as someone who has been coming to our complex citation sessions. So we're going to do a real high level here, knowing that the recommendations will have the details. So we did just do a recommendation review prior to it being final, getting feedback from the community at plenary 23, which is where the base of our slides are coming from here. This is in fact the link. And Bridget, I didn't give you these slides yet, so I apologize. I will do that as soon as our meeting's done. I'll pop them over to you. But you can find them in Zenodo if you just look up Complex Citation Working Group. 2 versions. You want the second one, of course. So scooting along, here is our challenge. So imagine you are one of the very many use cases where your research findings are based on a number of digital products. Let's say 40 data sets, a couple of packages of software, some physical samples, some videos, some images. And very commonly, your preferred journal comes back to you and says, listen, can't do it. That's too many citations in the reference section. We're going to push you into the supplementary information. Many of you know that I hail from the American Geophysical Union. We have our own journals. It happens in our own journals as well. The only journal I know who goes very high is Scientific Data out of Nature. Their data publication, I've seen a good number of citations, but it is incredibly unusual for that to happen. And we need a way to deal with that. Journals are not that great with data citations, so pushing it to them as a task is probably not going to get us where we need to go, certainly not in the time frame that we would prefer. So on the right-hand side, there's the impacts. There's attribution and credit. There's not being able to measure the value for funders and others. There's not being able to be machine actionable. And then the supplement of a paper is not considered part of the scientific record. So it doesn't, not every publisher treats it in the same way as publication. And commonly it's not maintained over time, and you do, occasionally there's a loss. So we have 3 use cases. We actually have many more. We actually have well over 20 use cases, but the recommendation, we focused on our initial 3. And when we work towards implementation in this next round in our maintenance, following the approval of this recommendation, we have a number of additional use cases. And if you're new to this working group and you're interested in adding your use case, please do. We're delighted to include you. So British Oceanographic Data Center. So imagine all of the different types of instruments, the large data sets, many sub-data sets, quite a complex knowledge graph. The International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, where we want to give attribution to the folks that created those individual figures within the reports. Really important for all of us. And then our third example is with the FluxNet towers, specifically Ameriflux, with Deb Agarwal and Joan Damerow, where they have PI teams for every single FluxNet, separate PI teams for FluxNets, and those teams change, and they want to be able to give attribution to those teams for the data used within research. So we introduced 2 new vocabulary words. And as we go into maintenance mode and figure out implementation, we suspect that the complex citation object will maintain, and then and what that will be, we do envision it as a digital object identifier, new type, supported through that registry agency community. And what it will contain is essentially a list of linked digital objects. So that would be all of those data sets, the software, anything else that would have a persistent identifier. We do recommend DOIs as the preferred persistent identifiers, but that's because of the scholarly, the journal community. They do prefer DOIs. We intend to allow every single possible persistent identifier, as well as just plain URL links, because we want to be complete with transparency, knowing that as a persistent identifier, as a complex citation object will be a persistent identifier, that we could always go back to create any linkages that couldn't happen at the when those persistent a non-DOI was being used. We could always recreate those links once the pipeline allows it, hopefully in the future. What are those 10 recommendations? This is the summary of them, simplified in the executive summary. And because of the time we have for this meeting, I chose to put that here instead of all 10 in more detail. It is quite a large recommendation, so you will get a lot more detail in the document. So starting at the top, the complex citation object, which is acronym CCO, capturing enough detail to ensure proper credit traceability and transparency, supporting machine actionable attribution. This is one that was of discussion at our P23. The object itself, we see it as an administrative element. We don't see it as a value add. It's just a collection of digital objects. So we don't want the authors of the complex citation object to get credit. We want the digital objects inside to get credit. So this is different than a collection, where the authors of the collection would get the credit. So it's like the opposite. And we're happy to have a conversation about that, but we thought about it quite a long time, and we really just want to see this complex citation object as a administrative entity, like a package that goes through publication and allows all of the digital objects to have their direct connection to the published peer-reviewed publication, or the in the case of the IPCC, to the linear. We certainly want this to be stable and persistent. That's R4 and 5. Structured as one would with a PID. And number 5 here, remain open, accessible, and flexible with an open license and sufficient metadata. So that is the short version of our recommendations. And there's a lot of people who have been part of this. The initial authors, a very large working group of contributors, and then the folks that supported updates and really gave us some excellent comments coming in on the first draft. And we're delighted to have had all of that. How'd I do, Martina?
I think you did really great. Maybe I can add one angle to it. So for the IPCC, the motivation was not only to give credit to those who created or generated the figures, but also to the input data providers, so the data that was used, but also enable a transparency of how the figure was created. So we'd like to combine this in this flexible complex citation object, so that we can add a bit more detail on provenance into that object, and this proposed or suggested format is flexible enough for that. And we just discussed, I think, with a new group who is interested to cite software and different components of software with that object. So it's really a very flexible approach. So I think that's what I wanted to add, but otherwise, great.
A number of folks here are participating. Meredith, representing the World Data System, has been giving us incredible feedback, as well as Raina. And we are excited. We have one of the critical stakeholders for this implementation is the digital registry. So we've had some conversation with DataCite on this. We have to have more intentional conversation. But for me, the hardest group to work with are the indexers. And we have confirmation that ADS will implement. And so they're now called SciX, but I am so excited. We got that confirmation last month. So I feel like the rest of it's downhill. Please, I'm knocking on wood. That's probably not true, but for me, that was the hardest thing. So we got we got it. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I think I will work more uphill, helping to create these objects or gather the information to create these objects is more in the focus for the IPCC at the moment.
There are many pieces. Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, because I haven't read all of the outputs, so I do apologise if it is covered. And I have been talking to Graham Parton, who's at STFC, but I just wondered, because you mentioned at the beginning about working with the publishers, and I just wondered how successful has that been with getting the journals on board, given that we've been talking data citation for quite a long time now, and it still isn't fully recognised in journal articles. I just wondered how successful you feel you're being.
Um, Elizabeth, I will be very quite honest with you. The recommendation is what we need done, not how. So,
Okay.
so I have been talking. I do have we have a COPDES, the Coalition on Publishing Data in the Earth and Space Sciences, and the publishers that participate in that, some of them have been kind of on the edges of this conversation. The nice thing is we have our own connection to Wiley, and so I've been keeping my own colleagues up to date, and they're keen to support us to figure this out. So for publishers, the challenge will be that they accept this new type of DOI. So we'll have to jump that hurdle. It's so similar to a collection, though, that I'm loath to be worried. I realize what it means, but I'm loath to be worried. It will then need to get over to Crossref and be recognized again. Those folks are, good to work with, so they don't always get development on the schedule you would like, but there's a doable process there. The challenge I see is, how do you do an in-text citation and publication? And the notional concept that we're equating this to is like a book and chapter. So you cite the chapter, like it's the complex citation, but really what we're citing is number 3 on the list. So what I'm hopeful about is that that will work out, that we'll be able to have a direct citation to the element in the list, and it's as simple as that. Now, join us in the next round of conversation as we actually make this happen.